the Pueblo Revolt of 1680. Some say it began with religious differences. Others believe that the oppression of the natives led to the revolt. But what really started this uprising? The truth is somewhere in the middle. The Pueblo Indians were living on American land before Juan de Oñate came to the New World. The Pueblo people were hunters and gatherers. They were peaceful and logical people who focused on coexisting with nature. What caused these Pueblos, who submitted to Spanish rule willingly, to revolt against Spaniards and the religion? When Oñate came to the New World, he brought with him horses, cattle, supplies, soldiers, disease, and Franciscans. The Franciscans were set on establishing missions for each Native American tribe. The purpose of these missions was to convert the indigenous people to Catholicism. If the natives didn't agree to live in the missions, they were either taken by force or wiped out as a whole in what is now called a massacre.
Some tribes, such as the Acoma, tried to fight back. The Spaniards, in retaliation, cut off 1 foot from each male member of the tribe over 25 years of age. The tribes then individually felt that they were outnumbered and outgunned, and therefore did exactly what the Spaniards asked. They went on each of the mission trips that they were assigned and did not argue or fight back.
Each mission was assigned a priest. All natives were forced to work in order to maintain life in the mission. On the Sabbath, all residents participated in a mass. Each town also had a church where the settlers could go to worship. Since many travelers passed through the settlements, each town had a place for incomers to stay. Often, there were rooms above a pub that were for rent. These buildings were called saloons. Some towns had a bed and breakfast for people who are passing through to stay and have a meal. By bringing horses, Oñate introduced a new form of transportation to America. Beforehand, traveling on foot was the only form of land transportation. Those who lived by the streams or other forms of water made boats to get across the water. The Native Americans didn't use any form of money. They traded goods for services or other goods. Spanish settlers, however, used reales and gold escudos as money. 1 real was worth 3 maravedis, Iberian gold coins. 8 reales were worth 1 silver peso. There was no set amount for gold escudos. Many Indians would travel to trading posts to trade skins for rifles. Settlers would use trading posts to buy unique Indian goods. Skins were very important to both the natives and the settlers. Deer, elk, rabbit, bighorn sheep, and turkey were the main sources of meat for all the people living in the area of the missions. Corn, beans, and squash were very important food sources as well. These seeds, fruits, nuts, and greens of pinyon, yucca, amaranth, ricegrass, and goosefoot were eaten often. Native American women handmade clothes for their families from the pelts of animals that were eaten. Men wore loincloths. Women wore dresses with necklaces made of either stones or bones. Some Spanish settlers made coats from these hides, but their clothing was often made of cotton fabric. Spanish women either wore plain dresses or a shirt with a skirt. Men wore trousers, shirts, and ponchos.
Both the Spanish and Indian children were very creative back in those days. The Indian children would generally make toys out of materials that were available to them. The girls would make corn husk dolls, and the boys would ride on sticks pretending that they were horses. The Spanish children would play more inclusive games in groups, such as Cupid's Coming, The Last Couple Out, and Taboo. They would also play other games that we have today, such as hopscotch, jump rope, and the seesaw. They were generally not chaperoned by their parents, so they had to develop ways to entertain themselves. this going for both the Indians and the Spanish children. They would most commonly play outside in the outdoors, but they would also play indoors when the time came.
Smallpox, sweating sickness, and bubonic plague were threats to all people in the Americas. Medicine men were the doctors for the Pueblo Indians. They relied on spirits and herbal remedies to heal wounds and sickness. Spanish doctors, however, believed in prayer and draining the contaminated blood from the body by puncturing a vein. When the epidemics broke out, both settlers and Indians died. The Indians continued to hold ritual powwows in the missions. However, the Spanish priests didn't agree with these practices and outlawed them. Instead, all settlers and natives had to attend Mass for Catholic holidays in churches. There was a church in every mission. These churches were decorated with beautiful paintings and statues. The native tribes were no longer allowed to practice traditional rituals or even own religious objects that didn't have to do with Catholicism. The Spanish law recognized this as wizardry. Though it may have been acceptable to the Indians, it was punishable by death in Spanish provinces. The Pueblo Indians were now forced to follow Catholicism or be put in jail. For many years, the Spanish government tried to reason with the priests. The religious leaders tried to abolish any native language or religion. The Spanish government, however, did not want to completely destroy the traditions of the Native Americans. Finally, after long disagreement, the government agreed to abolish all Indian ways. This enraged many medicine men. They couldn't practice their age-old tactics for healing their people. Despite the laws against it, the medicine men continued to heal their tribal members through magic. The Pueblo people and all others in the missions were enslaved. They were abused and forced to work in the fields. Many Pueblo members were angered by this, but would not rebel. They knew that alone they could not fight against the Spanish army.
The Spanish priests were truly awful to the Pueblo Indians. They enslaved them both sexually and physically. The Pueblos were forced to work the land and do all the chores that went into running the mission. Cooking the food, doing all the repairs, and making all their clothing.
Soon, disaster began to strike. Both settlers and Indians died of plagues and sickness. Famine and drought began to spread across the lands. People were dying all over America. The Pueblo people believed that the Great Spirits were punishing them for not being faithful. They began to continue worshiping the spirits of nature against the will of the law. The priests claimed they had received a message from God. They believed that the devastation was due to the Pueblo people not devoting themselves fully to Catholicism. 47 medicine men were imprisoned. 3 of these men were hung on the count of performing sorcery. After the execution of these few men, the remaining prisoners were freed because the Spanish government was afraid they would run away and start an uprising. During the imprisonment, one medicine man committed suicide before he could be hung. One of these imprisoned medicine men was Pope. After being released, Pope was furious. He started rallying people who believed that it was time to fight back.
Many people believe that Pope was a chief. Actually, he was a medicine man. He was imprisoned by the Spaniards. Back then, medicine men had a very large and significant impact on the lives of their tribes and what their people believed. He convinced the Pueblo to revolt against the Spaniards, but they knew they couldn't do it alone.
Soon, Pope began to reach out to the other Pueblo tribes. He started to make plans for a revolt. He communicated these plans to the Pueblos in other missions. Their form of communication was sending a messenger to deliver knotted cords to the other missions. These knotted cords were strings made from yucca. Each string had a certain amount of knots tied in it. Each day, the chief would untie a knot. When all the knots were gone, it was time to attack. 70 tribes were involved in the revolt. These tribes included the Carasan, Katiti, Tiwa Tapatu, Teos, Tiwa, Hopi, Keres, Teos, Haka, Tompiros, Tawas, Piros, Utes, Navajo, Apache, and Zuni tribes. Most of these tribes spoke Karasan, but some had their own language. Together, they decided to attack Santa Fe on August 10, 1680. Meanwhile, Fray Francisco had received word that Santa Fe was out of supplies and soldiers due to drought. He traveled to Santa Fe to bring these rations and reinforcements. The settlers were frightened when he got there because they were growing suspicious of the Pueblo people. They had begun to realize that they were planning on attacking. Unfortunately, they were unsure what they could do because they couldn't attack the missions or accuse them of anything without proof. Worried, Fray Francisco called for reinforcements to be sent. An answer wasn't coming quick enough, so Fray Francisco stayed in El Paso del Norte while he was waiting. On the 10th, the 70 Indian tribes attacked. They killed 22 of the 33 priests that were in Santa Fe. All churches and buildings within the area were burnt. 380 Spaniards were killed in the revolt. Fray Francisco received a letter about the uprising on August 25th. El Paso del Norte started to prepare to accept the survivors who were fleeing from Santa Fe. There were over 3,000 people who escaped the attack. A new temporary government was elected since Santa Fe was destroyed.
When the revolt was over, the Pueblo Indians got their land back, went back to their old ways, and established their own government. After 12 years, the Spaniards returned to the area, relocated the Pueblos onto reservations, and rebuilt the missions. The Spaniards kept a tight grip on the Indians so that there would not be another revolt again.
The Pueblo Revolt did have the desired effects, although it only lasted until the Spaniards came back in 1692. Native Americans were more securely governed and were kept on reservations. Many Native Americans, including the Pueblo Indians, live on reservations today, but none of them will forget the revolt that changed history forever. Ready? Move! Alright, go. Alright, let's see how that went. Alright, turn. Go.